Welcome to Out of the Fold. On February 9th, the Secular Party of Australia hosted an event called Losing Your Religion. Among the speakers were Zara Kay, whose interview I posted today as well, and my guest in this episode, Nick Gray. Nick and I recorded this immediately after the event. Nick runs a blog called The Nullifidian, and she and others host a show called Heretics Corner, which was how I found her. Links to all of these are in the description, and we talk about them in this episode. When I created my show, I didn't know that there were others who had the idea before me. I knew about atheism-focused shows, but it wasn't until after I started Out of the Fold that I became aware of ones for people who have left one specific religion, and Heretics Corner was the only one I found that had guests from multiple religions. There are probably others that I'm unaware of, and I'll promote them as I find them. Nick and I share a vision that people who have left religion can help each other out, even if we're from different former beliefs, even if it just means listening. If, after listening to our interview, you want to share your story but think you may be more comfortable doing so with her instead of me, I'll be more than happy to arrange that contact. No religious organizations, companies, or individuals were contacted for comment about any of the content of this episode. The views expressed are strictly those of the ones expressing them. Our conversation began on a Saturday morning for me, a Saturday evening for her. I started by asking her about the event. Today was the Losing Your Religion conference. It's a conference that's run by the Secular Party of Australia. It's the second year it's ran, and basically it's all about ex-Muslims having an opportunity to speak up. So this year we had obviously myself, Zara Kay, Harris Sultan, and Navabi, and we kind of all gave like our own little spiels and talks about ourselves and our journeys and what ex-Muslims need. It was really interesting actually. It was a lot heated than last year, definitely. A lot of differing, I guess you could say, opinions. But it was good. It was good fun. I actually really enjoyed it. I'm exhausted because I was there for 11 hours. Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it was really good. So basically I spoke about a little bit of myself and my journey, which we can go into more detail later, but I was primarily focusing myself personally on the lack of support and resources and understanding that ex-Muslims face in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when you say that it was heated, do you mean like it was heated between the conference members, or was it heated like who all was it? Like was it sort of like a town hall format where you guys spoke with each other and then people from the outside gave input and questions as well, or was it just you guys talking to each other and then somehow that was made public?
No, so it was an actual event, so people could buy tickets to attend. It was held like at a little conference hall, I guess you could say. So we each individually would get up and we spoke about whatever topic we felt like speaking about. Most of us kind of like touched on our experiences and then topics that were close to our heart. And then we had some panels. So we spoke about feminism in Islam and also can Islam be reformed? And obviously those are the two where it got a bit heated.
Gotcha. What are your opinion on those things?
Well, for myself, with regards to you can't be a feminist and Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
you just can't. I'm pretty simple about that one, and I also don't think Islam can be reformed. So I don't really have much to put towards it besides those 2 points. But we had the panel open to the floor, so people could ask us questions at any time. And I think that's where I got a little bit heated with some people, because our audience weren't just atheists. Our audience were Christians. We had even Christian ex-Muslims in our audience, so it definitely can get a bit heated in that regard, definitely.
Yeah. So the issue of the connection between Islam, or maybe even just the hijab and feminism, is something that, I mean, I came to the defense of somebody recently on Twitter because she just, she was getting bombarded for supporting No Hijab Day, as though that was somehow like a like a racist thing. Which, first of all, is a stupid statement, because Islam is a religion and not a race. But that's a whole other thing. But the point is that it was like. It's like Islam sort of is sort of like on a pedestal these days. Like it's like you can't criticize it in the same way that you can other religions. And I can only imagine that. And I'll want to hear your story in just a moment. But I can only imagine that, like, if there were somebody who left a Muslim majority country and had the hijab used as an oppressive tool against them, they'd be incredibly confused to come to the West and see it being used as a symbol of feminism.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be women from the Middle East coming to, or Muslim countries coming to Australia or America or Canada. It can be even women that have been raised in these countries that experience that. Because I myself personally, I've lived in Muslim countries, but I've spent most of my life in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And so being forced into a hijab and niqab from such a young age, I find that concept of it's not a freeing thing, because I couldn't not wear it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that choice. So, and I was living in a Western country. So, yeah, I'm aware of, like, the No Hijab Day, which is funny. Before we even began the panel for feminism, we all kind of spoke together and we said, let's not talk about the hijab, because it's a flogged horse. Like, it's almost every single time someone talks about feminism in Islam, they tend to talk about hijab.
Fair enough.
Okay,
yeah.
We don't want to go there. We want to talk about other things that happen. And unfortunately, we still ended up going there. Because it's such an iconic thing that is used by Muslims and I guess you would call them like white version of feminism. And when I say white, I'm not saying like white women. I'm just saying like I guess you could say third wave feminism or lefty feminism or this current flavor of feminism that exists. So I don't know. It was a really interesting a debate. I think most of us on the panel kind of agreed that, Islam and feminism are not cohesive with each other. I mean, then, like, if you even look at the text, it's not really, like, at all. Like, it can't. And it does become kind of like, I guess you could call it like an oxymoronic state where you have feminism, you're a Muslim feminist or a gay Muslim. Like, those two things, they just don't work together.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So I think maybe it's just my own kind of newness to this, where I immediately sort of the thing that a lot of people end up talking about, or maybe it's just because we're at that point right now, having passed World Hijab Day, and the counter movement, No Hijab Day, how it's like that's still sort of a topic of conversation. But that's actually a really good point, that there is more to why you can't be a feminist and Islamic at the same time, that doesn't have anything to do with the hijab. Now, when you're talking about that, are you just talking about sort of the general misogynistic like energy of Islam, like how it all sort of subjugates women in general? Could you kind of elaborate on that a little bit, like what other things there are?
So, I mean, you've got your standard, obviously the hijab is definitely a big one. Segregation.
Mm-hmm.
So taking the hijab out of the equation, men and women are still segregated. Even if you look at mosques, women have to sit at the back of the mosque or in a room off to the side or completely far away from everybody else. Inheritance laws, women inherit less. So, for example, say a father has passed away, he's got one boy and two daughters. The boy will get like 50%, and each daughter will get 25%.
Yeah.
So, that's a classic example of it not being all for like equal rights or women's rights or anything like that. When it comes to things like divorcing, when a husband divorces his wife, he divorces his wife. It's simple. It's kind of clean cut. But then when a woman wants to divorce her husband, she has to go and she has to speak to somebody, and then they have to just kind of like convince her to not leave. And then even in some Islamic schools of thought, if a woman chooses to divorce her husband, she actually has to return her dowry. So it's like, well, why doesn't the man have to return the dowry? Modesty culture is a big thing as well. Like when you look at a Muslim man can go, and no, this may not be in the religion, but it is definitely part of Islamic culture. A man can kind of tiptoe that edge of, I guess you could call it, misbehaving. So, he could kind of leave the house, he could shave his beard off and all that's not that big of a deal. But with a Muslim woman, if she was to leave her house in a certain way or act a certain way or talk to certain people, there's so much pressure on them.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it's just kind of like it's an ongoing thing. Like in the Quran, it was brought up today on the panel is that, why is it in the Quran? It says that a husband can beat his wife if she's like misbehaves. Yeah, so obviously not going straight away, but it's admonish, forsake them in their beds, and then beat them. But why can't the same be for men? Like, why can't it just be your spouse?
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of opens up this big like floodgates, and you can keep talking about it for ages and ages and ages, but it's intense. Like, do you have like 20 years for us to keep talking?
Right. So what are some of the arguments against that? Like, what do people say that gets them that they think is evidence that you can be a Muslim and a feminist?
Well, a lot of the times they will use Muhammad's first wife, Khadija, as an example of, oh, look, she had her own business and she was this and she was powerful. But what a lot of the times they forget is she was all of this before she even married Muhammad,
Mm-hmm.
before Islam even existed. And yes, in that time, women, young daughters were being buried alive by their parents, and those things were all happening in that time. But and then there was that time where women were given, I guess you could say, a bit more rights, but then we have to clarify that even further. Free women were given more rights than slave women, because slave women was still a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, okay, well, free women have more rights than slave women, but have more rights than they previously had. And even in that time, perhaps it was, I mean, it has been used as, I mean, it's like, oh, well, in that time, 1440 odd years ago, yeah, okay, I'll say Islam may have been a bit more progressive than others around them. But even if you look beyond that, you had Queen of Sheba. She was a queen, and that was before the time of Muhammad.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of Muslim women are taught from such a very young age that Islam is feminist, or not feminist, sorry. Islam gave women rights before anyone else. And so it's so deeply ingrained into them, and they're given these examples as well. And so they use these sort of, I guess you call them arguments, to kind of defend it. They turn something like the hijab into not a covering, which it is, because not a separation. They're like, oh no, but this protects me. They're kind of, in a sense, brainwashed into believing that by wearing this piece of cloth on my head, it makes me better than other women. It protects me. It elevates me. And I think it takes a lot of time, because I've met even ex-Muslim women who've said that they were really big on defending the hijab and
Mm-hmm.
the niqab and all that stuff. So, like, I myself personally never really did it. I wore it, but I never really defended it.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know. It's kind of it's a tricky thing to explain why Muslim women do it, but I definitely think it stems from the fact that from such a young age it is kind of bludgeoned into their heads that this is what you have to say. It's like an automatic response to, if someone says something about Islam, in regards to women's rights, it's an automatic response. Oh, but Islam gave women rights before anyone else. Oh, but Khadija was a caravan and she was a rich woman. Or this, or that, they had rights and this and that. But yeah.
Sounds like a pretty loose argument, honestly. Like it
is.
Like there's not a whole lot of, like, it doesn't have a whole lot of teeth. Like, it's just kind of, I don't know. It feels like you're kind of grasping at straws. Like, I spoke with an ex-Orthodox Jew the other day, and I mean, it was honestly very similar, but there are, and I don't mean to like compare Islam and Judaism in like what it is in the world today. You know what I mean? It's just like, there's obviously a whole lot more punishment for not doing certain things in Islam than there are in any other religion right now. But yeah, I mean, it's like, there aren't a whole lot of people that like defend it as though, defend that sort of separation as though it is actually somehow better for women in that way. It's like this, I guess maybe I'm an idiot, but like, I kind of think that kind of responsibility is on men. I think that responsibility for like, women needing to be modest for some reason. I mean, that's sort of a response to the fact that, men kind of need to improve, and like, it doesn't matter if someone's like running down the street naked, like, it doesn't give you the right to assault her. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that is one thing, but also the other thing that happens in these sort of societies and Muslim societies is that, yes, okay, men will say, put a hijab on, and men need to learn to control themselves, and men will be all about modesty culture. But I know of more women who've been forced and peer pressured by other women to wear the hijab or niqab or practice any form of like modesty culture. And, you know, yes, men would have a factor into that. And there's that whole concept of like, oh, men can't control themselves, which is bullshit.
Yeah, we can control ourselves. That's stupid.
Everyone can control themselves.
Yeah.
But then with that mentality as well, it's taking, it's what's the word I'm trying to say? Like infantilizing men and making them as if they are children and don't know how to act correctly and putting the entire blame on women.
Right.
Why should it be a woman's responsibility to stop a man from wanting to have sex with her or assault her or whatever? Like, how is it that a piece of cloth, because literally that's what they're made of, silk, cotton, polyester, pick your flavor of fabric you want.
Yeah.
But it's literally a piece of cloth. And how is it that this little cloth can stop a man from raping you? It's illogical because it doesn't stop it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it doesn't stop it in general also because, I mean, there are women who are sexually assaulted that do wear the hijab as well.
Exactly. If you look at the Mosque Me Too movement, so, and I heard about this growing up, like the amount of times women were in Hajj, and so they're doing the little pilgrimage and like walking around the Kaaba in Mecca, and they would have men pinching their butts. Like, come on, you're in the middle of one of the most religious things a Muslim can do, and you're filling up the chick in front of you. You know, and these women, it's not like they're in a bikini, they're like robed up and they're covered and everything. So I don't know. It's a really, really interesting topic, and you know there could be so many reasons as to why it happens, but yeah, it's there's a bit heated.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I mean, I think that I think that you touched on something else that was that might be associated with that as well, which is that you said that you don't believe that Islam can be reformed. Now, when you say that, do you mean that you think that it's that like sort of Islam in its current incarnation can't be reformed, or do you think that like there's just something about Islam that makes it unreformable and different from other religions that have been reformed?
Okay, I will tell you why I believe Islam cannot be reformed. Look at the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible is a collection of stories and whatnot of other people. It is acknowledged that the Bible was written by mankind.
Mm-hmm.
The Quran is said to be the literal word of God. Like, yes, okay, obviously it was written down by humans, but it's been said that it came from the heavens by Gabriel, who came to Muhammad and gave Muhammad the verses, and you know, so that's the one thing. The second reason why I don't believe Islam can be reformed is because if you were to reform Islam, you would have to change Islam.
Mm-hmm. And
if you change Islam, that goes against Islam, which takes you out of the fold of Islam, which makes you an ex-Muslim.
Mm.
So it's quite logical, because if you do that, you're changing the word of God, okay? And Muslims believe that you can't change the word of God. So if you come in and you're going to change that word of God, are you saying that you're better than God, that you know better than God? Because God created this. And so when someone says that they're going to change the Quran or change parts or aspects of the Quran, you're saying you're better than your God, so therefore you don't need that God, so you're an ex-Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can say that Muslims can reform. They can choose to not hurt anyone. They can choose to do all sorts of things. And I always use it, whenever I've been asked this question, I always use this thing of like, get a Christian, get a Jew, get a Hindu, get a Muslim, and get an atheist. Line them all up, and you ask them these questions. Ask them, would you kill your neighbor?
Mm-hmm.
They're all probably going to say no. Would you rape the girl walking down the street? All again, probably going to say no. And you ask them those sort of questions, these morality questions, and they're all going to say the same thing. So is it religion that gives people these guidance and tells them, oh, these are the good things and the bad things that you can do, or is it the human being itself? And when you take it from all of those, it's the only common denominator that all those people would have is the fact that they're human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really well put. And it's an argument that you don't really hear too often. It is something that I've been thinking about recently, sort of like this idea of us having, some sort of fundamental morality, or like we know what's right and what's wrong, and religion doesn't give it to us. It's something that we kind of work on as we get older, but it's not necessarily, specific and exclusive to religion as far as like where we get these things. So it sounds like you're starting to come to you're like, developing this in a way that, it's fascinating, and it's not necessarily science. I mean, it is scientific, but it's just like, it's humanity. It's what we all kind of have within us.
It's like, and then it brings up the other question. Okay, who's going to decide what stays in Islam and what goes out?
Right.
Who's going to make those decisions? Because I'll tell you straight up, Muslims can't even agree on half the shit in their religion. They can't. Well, look at the biggest two groups, the Shiites and the Sunnis. They can't freaking agree, and they've not been able to agree for freaking almost over 1,300 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then even if you could just into Sunnis, you have your schools of thought. You then have your groups like ISIS, you've got Taliban, you've got Hizb ut-Tahrir, you've got Boko Haram, then you have Muslims with progressive values. Like what? Are we going to nominate a person from each of these groups to go up and be like, well, I want to keep this, and they're going to put it's completely not possible. It cannot be done. And okay, well then, do we just take some bits? And I don't know, like it's the way Christianity's kind of been explained to me, like in the parts of the Bible, is you got your Old Testament and your New Testament, and no one really pays attention to the Old Testament because it's barbaric, but the New Testament is better. This is kind of what my understanding is.
It's about
Correct me
right.
if I'm wrong. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, well then, the difference between, I guess you could say, your Old Testament Christians and your New Testament Christians, is that, well, we actually still have people on earth who are Muslims who follow Islam to a T, and they actually want to kill people. They actually want to have slavery. They actually want to take over the world. They want to actually destroy the West. They want to they want to promote Islam violently because by the sword. And so it's like, so do we just kind of like create a new version of the Quran? But then what about the old version of the Quran? Are we going to go through and destroy every single copy of the Quran on earth? Like, it'd be a massive undertaking, in my opinion.
So what do you think about people that are trying to do that? Like, do you think it's just an effort in futility, or do you think that, if they do somehow manage to kind of bring people into some sort of fold of, peaceful Islam, like let's say they call it that, and I'm exaggerating, but like I don't, but let's say that, like, they sort of say, we don't need to pay attention to these aspects of the Quran or of the Hadith that say, about that are about violence. We need to live in a society. We're going to elevate this stuff about peace, and that's going to be what's important to us. Do you think that there's any value to them spending time in doing that?
Well, okay. I've been doing this ex-Muslim online activism and speaking about it for a very long time. Most of the Muslims who I've seen, and this is my personal experience and also the experiences of my friends, most of the Muslims who come after ex-Muslims are the ones that believe in the peaceful version of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that say, oh, Islam doesn't sanction sex slavery, child marriage, polygamy, or those. So they're like, oh, no, Islam doesn't say that. So we already have this group of, like, I guess you would call them moderate Muslims who say that we don't accept these bits of Islam, but still, can you like, I'm probably going to swear here, but
you can swear, that's fine. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. You're going to have these Muslims that'll be like, we're going to reject all the bad shit in Islam, but if you're going to talk shit about Islam, fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't, which is true, it doesn't matter how if we change Islam, okay? It doesn't matter if it does change and these moderates are turning around and then, there's no one going to be, like, we're not going to have ISIS happen again, That's great. I don't want ISIS to happen. I don't want any of that to happen. But if you were to go to a Muslim and say to them, I'm an ex-Muslim, they will still treat me like shit. Mm-hmm. They don't care because I am the most offensive thing. An ex-Muslim is the most offensive thing possible to a Muslim.
Yeah.
I guess the same thing could be for ex-Christians to Christians, Jews to, like, I feel like it's in the sense it's the same thing. And so I always wonder for reformists, I always wonder what their motive is. Are they trying to pander to the West or the left? Are they themselves closeted ex-Muslims and trying to change things from within? I just feel like it's such a murky area because it would still, when it comes to ex-Muslims, it's still going to erase our experiences. Like Islam's been, okay, let's look at this like hypothetical situation. Islam has been reformed. The general Islam has been reformed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They're not throwing gays off roofs. They're women have full equal rights. Like let's look at this like prettied up, amazing version of Islam that may exist in like a million years. And my family subscribe to a very extreme version of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And I get up there and I talk about my experiences with this extreme version of Islam. Are these reformists going to shut me down and tell me that my experiences aren't valid because that was kind of the wrong version of Islam and I shouldn't be like, talking shit about Islam because I should just talk shit about the really bad version of Islam I was raised in?
Mm-hmm.
Because guess what? That's happening right fucking now.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what people do. I mean, reformists or otherwise. You sort of talked about the climate in Australia, and I don't know if it's similar over there as it is over here. But I mean, yeah, we talked about it very briefly about like how Islam is sort of put on pedestal as one of those things that you can't critique. You're not allowed to talk about the fact that there are Islamic theocracies or that there are people that are in danger in. You said that it's not even just Muslim majority countries. It's people that come from conservative Muslim families. You're not even allowed to really talk about that. And you made a good point also that like I really don't mean to imply that Muslims are violent as a whole. Like obviously that's not something that I agree with. But when you talked about doing this conference, it sounds like there's just that it's such a volatile topic that I've seen ex-Muslims sort of get alienated by obviously Christians, obviously a lot of people that are Jewish, a lot of people that are also atheist and feel like you're allowed to, like I said, criticize Christianity, but you're not allowed to criticize Islam. Is it about the same in Australia?
Oh, definitely. Let me just so the organizers of this event reached out to all the major media outlets. Got a conference coming on. They're going to be people speaking about their experiences, like come and listen to these people's stories and write news articles happen. One journalist showed up. One.
Really?
Yeah.
Because it was just too controversial?
Definitely, because I think perhaps it may not be as bad as what's happening. Not bad, I guess you could say, but not as progressed in the conversation in Australia as it is overseas. And I think perhaps it could be a number of factors into that. But it's such a topic that they've tiptoed around because, for example, in Australia, we have a lot of like boat people coming here. So illegal immigrants coming to Australia. Most of these illegal immigrants are from a Muslim background, like most of them are. And so it's just kind of a really like sensitive topic, and it's quite funny even in LGBTQIA, whatever other letters are now added to that. But even those environments. So I know for a fact, a gay ex-Muslim, he was gay, but everyone just assumed he was Muslim because he never really spoke about it, and he loved him. The LGBTQ community loved him. They supported him. They're like, yes, you go. You're great, blah, blah. Then he came out as an ex-Muslim and they dropped him so fast.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and this is not the first time it's happened, or it's probably not going to be the last time. And so I live in probably what you would call, it gets a bit confusing in Australia because our liberals are our conservatives. So I live in what you would call a liberal state, in the sense that it is lefty, but we're not called liberals It's confusing, I know. And my state is probably, I want to say it's like a hard state to live in if you're trying to speak about these issues. It's kind of it's got a big melting pot of multiculturalism and all that sort of stuff. So if I was to go to the north, so I guess you could call it the Australians Bible Belt, which is Queensland, I'd probably get a lot of like right-wing support about ex-Muslims and all that sort of stuff. But down here where I live, which is in Victoria, and it has a massive Muslim community. Like the Muslim community here is something like, I think it's like 500,000 now, maybe. It could be a bit more than that. And so everyone's kind of like, oh, you know, the victim Muslim, without realizing that the Muslims are creating victims of their own, which are the ex-Muslims.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Isn't it crazy the things that we do to like just to be offended? You know, it's like, you know, I get where it's coming from. Like they don't want, you know, Muslims to be discriminated against, and I don't want that. I don't want Muslims to be harassed in the street. I mean, that's terrible. But the idea that you can't even talk about it, you know, talk about these issues that, you know, that are directly associated with something. I mean, it's like, I don't want to say that like it is some like regressive thing, because I think that's sort of, I don't know. I mean, maybe it is, but it's. I mean, let's like have an honest discussion about what these things are. I mean, that's absurd that the guy that was part of the LGBT community came out as ex-Muslim, and that's when they demonized him. I mean, that's fucked up.
Oh yeah, it's definitely fucked up, and it's kind of like this thing. You know, I think it was Ubaid Omar who said it, that everyone's too afraid to I'm probably like paraphrasing the fucking hell out of this, but everyone is so afraid to touch Islam because it's the brown man's religion.
Mm.
You know, you can talk shit about Christianity from here to the end of fucking time. No one's really going to bat an eye. You can do the same thing about Judaism. You can do the same thing about Hinduism. Every religion on earth you can talk shit about. But you can't talk shit about Islam. And why is that? And, you know, is it just because it's a brown man's religion? Okay, well then what about the Hindus or the Jews? Oh, and then, you know, I've always had this theory that maybe it's because of fear. Because if I talk shit about a Christian, they're not going to blow me up. If I talk shit about a Jew, they're not going to attack me in the street. I could draw a cow doing something fucking weird. A Hindu's not going to come and kill me. I say one bad thing about Muhammad, the end of the fucking world for Muslims.
Mm. Yeah. Why is that? Is that just, you know, is that more so culture, or is that something written in to Holy Scripture?
Muslims are taught that Muhammad is the perfect man.
Mm-hmm.
He's the greatest man ever. And from such a young age, you're taught that this is the man you need to aspire to be like. This is the man that has everything that we need. He's the final messenger of God. And it's kind of, in a sense, like worship. You know, no Muslim's ever going to come out and say that they worship Muhammad because, well, it's against the religion. But they hold him so on such a high pedestal. Same thing about Islam being held on a pedestal. Muslims hold Muhammad on such a high pedestal that anything you say against him, it's like, how could you? How could you? This man is amazing. He created Islam. That's my religion. Like he's the greatest, most amazing, perfect. Like he was chosen by God. Who are you to say shit about him?
Mm-hmm. So it's just like his character as a whole is just completely off limits for anything, for any negativity whatsoever.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'd like to sort of hear a little bit more about your history. So where, you know, what, you know, you said you were raised in a pretty, you know, extreme extreme Islamic family. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, first thing, I don't say I was necessarily raised in extreme. I just say it was more of an authentic version of Islam.
Okay.
That's what's currently peddled out. So Backstory: my mother converted to Islam, which we can leave that for a whole another day. Why do people convert to Islam? I don't know. But so she converted to Islam, met my stepfather, married, had kids, etc., etc., etc. I like to say she fell down the rabbit hole of religious, I guess you call it extremism, very, very quickly. Um, so we're raised in this society, and she was very much into Islam is the only way. Anything that goes against Islam, we need to take out of the house. So, there were times in life we had no TV, we slept on the floor, we ate on the floor, we ate with our hands, like all that kind of stuff, because it was the way Muhammad lived. I guess you could say that I was a very curious child, a very questioning child, but I was also the kind of child that was very much aware of what's fair and what's not, and what's truth and what's justice. I was always very aware of these concepts. And so I used to kind of always think about things like, I used it as an example today at the conference. Why is it that, the nice Christian man next door is going to go to hell purely because he's a Christian, but the imam who beats his wife and his kids, he's going to heaven just because he's Muslim?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't understand it. And so you'd ask a question like that. You'd be like, okay, but why? They're like, oh no, but he is sinning, so he's going to go to hell, but he's only going to be in hell for a small amount of time because he is Muslim at the end of the day, and then he'll just go to heaven. And it's like, but that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I wore the hijab at 7, and that progressively got longer. So I started with this little cute one tied under my chin, and then it progressively kind of grew, I guess you could say on me. Instead of being able to see my hair grow, you got to see my hijab grow. And it kind of progressed down past my knees, and I was wearing the abaya, which is the black dress underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And then I turned, I was 12 or 13, and then my mum put the niqab on me. And so I wasn't obviously at school at that point because everybody would question why a 12-year-old girl was wearing a niqab. So I didn't really have much of an education. The highest level I achieved whilst living at home was grade 6. So I was obviously 11, 12 years old. My family, it would just give you a rough idea. My family kind of were like, oh, well, September 11th happened. That's because, America is in the evil West are persecuting Muslims. And I'm like, where the fuck was they persecuting Muslims? They were persecuting Muslims, so, it's good. We need to go support these people. Let's raise funds for them. Osama bin Laden is a great man. He's trying to, spread the message of Islam. He's standing up to the evil, corrupt West. I guess you could call that a rough idea of what my upbringing was. I was heavily exposed to, people wanting to blow buildings up in Australia. I was heavily exposed to people who'd come back from Afghanistan in the 80s. So they'd gone to Afghanistan in the 80s when, the US had helped bin Laden fight against the Soviets.
Mm-hmm.
So these people, obviously come back to Australia, and I was surrounded by this kind of environment I was in. So that's why, when I say I wasn't necessarily an extremist version of Islam, it was more of an authentic version of Islam because I only knew Islam. I didn't have I wasn't influenced by an Arab culture or an African culture or a South Asian culture. It was just purely Islam because my family's social circle weren't just Arabs or Somalians or Pakistanis. They were all kind of this group that kind of came together because they all believed in this authentic version of Islam. Now, I traveled with my family to Somalia a number of times. We lived there for a bit. I lived in Dubai. Not nice places. I mean, Dubai's pretty and all that, but once you've been there for a little bit, you kind of start to see all the cracks in society, start to see all the racism that's prevalent throughout the society in those environments, because it's all sanctioned by Islam and it's all sanctioned by the governments there. And so, growing up, I was kind of always a bit like, oh, this doesn't make sense. And then I would be like, oh, but maybe I'm too young to understand all this sort of stuff. So, I started questioning. I started asking questions. And I'm a big nerd. I love to read. so I would read through the Islamic text, and I guess I had some kind of a little advantage over others, is because my stepfather is a sheikh. So I'd go to him and I'd ask him questions, and I'd be like, oh, can you, like, the whole concept of, oh, but you don't speak Arabic, how can you understand? I'm like, okay, cool. Well, then, my dad speaks Arabic, so I'm going to get him to get the Arabic version and explain it to me. So he would do that, and I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. So you're saying that's correct, what I've been told in English?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, okay, great. So yeah, my brothers do have more rights than me. I have to wear the hijab and niqab. Oh, okay. And so, eventually it kind of like gets on you. And as you're growing up and older, and I feel this is a common thing across many, many people who kind of are in these sort of situations, whether you're Muslim or Christian or Jew, is when you kind of hit not preteen, but kind of like your mid-teen years, so like 14, 15, 16, and 17, is when you start to kind of, I guess you're not question, but a bit more analyze what's going on, because you're trying to figure out your identity and who are you, and like, is there something wrong with you with the way you're thinking? And so I, would begin to study, and I would ask questions, and I would always eventually, like, I'd get shut down and be like, well, if you keep asking these questions, you're clearly questioning God, and that's against the religion. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I've got no one to ask. And then there's all these things like, you can't ask certain questions, because if you ask certain questions in the Muslim community that I was in, it's like, okay, well, if you ask these questions or acting a certain way, you must be possessed by the devil. And so they would do things like exorcisms if you ask these sort of questions. And the way Muslims do exorcisms is not a fun thing. You don't want to see it. Like grown men holding down a 14-year-old girl while she's like screaming at them to let her go, or spitting on her and reciting verses of the Quran. Like, it's like you don't want that to happen.
God, yeah.
So it's quite a traumatic thing. So you're obviously going to avoid that sort of thing. And so I kind of was like, about Islam. I was like, oh, you know what? I don't really believe in it, but I mean, it's the only way of life I've really known, so I might just like kind of stick with it, but I'm not going to really believe in it. I'm just going to like do what my parents tell me to do. And then when I was 15, my sister passed away, and it was an accident. And I remember I was there, and I was like, the fuck? And I was like seriously, like they'd just been on the news about this man who'd been arrested for raping and killing like 15 kids. And he's still alive, and my little 2-year-old sister's dead in my arms. And I was like, if there's a God, he's a fucking dickhead, and I want nothing to do with him.
Yeah. And
then also, like, that in that moment as well, I learned how tiny and inconsequential our lives are. Like, we're just like a blip in the vastness of our universe. We're like this tiny little blip. And so I was like, well, I'm a tiny little blip, so I might as well make the most of my tiny little blip existence. So I began to fight a lot. I began to fight with my parents about, like simple things like trying to get an education or going to the library and stuff like that. I did succeed convincing my parents to let me go to college to do like my like my year 11, like my kind of like my high school certificate. But that didn't last long. They'd show up randomly. There was one time where I was actually in the library, and this gentleman asked me some help on a computer. And I was like, okay, no worries. I'm being a nice person. I'm going to help this person who's asked me to help him. And my parents walked into the library as they saw me like leaning over this gentleman and pointing at something on the monitor. And all hell broke loose. They grabbed me, pulled me out, calling me a whore and a slut, and it took me 4 weeks. I think it's 4 weeks. No, 2 weeks. 2 weeks of me to convince them that I wasn't dating this boy, and another 2 weeks for me to convince them to actually let me go back.
Wow.
And yeah, it's like I'm like literally like I was like go. I had call him, go and find him, look at the CCTV, like. I was like doing all of that because, there's this big kind of stigma of like, Muslim girls and how the family honor rests on them, and Muslim girls are going to be the ones that are going to like, they're going to be the fuck around, and they're going to be the rebels, and they're going to do all this, and they're going to do that, and you need to control them. And I just was like, I can't understand this. Like, I've done everything right. I've done everything right, and I'm still in this environment. And I wanted to get out, but I didn't know how to get out. Now, we're talking, this is about, oh, wow, giving my age away, 10 years ago. And so I was like, well, I need to get out because I'm going to, like, lose my shit. I'm actually going to go insane if I keep staying in this environment. Now, back then, and even now, which is why I was speaking about it today, is there's no resources for someone who's an ex-Muslim. I didn't even know what an ex-Muslim was. I knew people could leave Islam. I'd heard of Ayaan Hirsi Ali, but I knew what it was in Arabic, which is murtad, but I had no clue what an ex-Muslim was. I didn't know like I could go online, I could type in the word ex-Muslim and find people. Like nowadays, you can just go online and you can type ex-Muslim and you'll find something about people leaving Islam.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do that. And granted, also I was under like almost 24/7 surveillance with my parents taking like my phone and everything off me, so I couldn't really do any of that. And so I pretty much openly became an ex-Muslim the same night that I left home. Now, I don't recommend anyone leave their home the way I left my home. It's a bit stupid. Got into an argument with my parents, and they were like, go get your phone, you're not allowed to have it anymore, bring it into our room. And I remember I walked into my room, and I grabbed my phone, and my purse was right next to me. I grabbed my phone, and in that split second, I was like, no, I am done with this. I can't, I literally cannot keep living like this. I'm living a lie. I hate my life. I hate my own existence. I'm so fucking miserable. So I was like, no, I can't do it. So I grabbed my phone, I grabbed my purse, and I started walking towards the front door, and my dad's gone, where are you going? And I looked at him, looked him dead in the eye, and I said, fuck you and fuck your God. And then I ran like fucking hell out that door.
Way to go.
I mean, yeah, it's great. I don't recommend it because I had no money, nowhere to go. Like, I was proper fucked. So I don't recommend it. Ironically, that was the first time I ever swore as well. So I think it's a
nice.
It's a great moment.
Great first time.
I think so, yeah. And so, yeah, basically I left home and had nowhere to go. Thankfully, a girl that I'd made kind of friends with when I was very briefly at this college, I called her and I said, look, I left home. I've got nowhere to go. And she's like, come stay with me. Come stay on my couch. And then it was really hard. So, I couldn't get onto government benefits because, well, my parents had all my ID. I couldn't prove who I was. I couldn't prove anything. I couldn't get a job because I had no like educational or work experience. I couldn't even get onto like a job agency because I couldn't get onto benefits who would forward me to the job agency. And it was just kind of like terrible experience for me. And so, I've persevered. Obviously, I'm still here. But yeah, so it was a kind of a shitty thing. And I actually didn't know what an ex-Muslim was until I think it was 2015. And I left home in 2011. 2011, that's like a long time ago when I left home. And so I don't know what an ex-Muslim was. And I remember I was reading the news because I'm obsessed with like reading the news and stuff like that. And I was like, literally, no lie of a word. I saw this article and I was like, the fuck is an ex-Muslim? I was like, the fuck is this shit? So when I opened it up and I was reading it, I was like, huh. And so I jumped online and I typed in ex-Muslim. I discovered Tumblr, which is like a cesspool of ugh. But I met some amazing ex-Muslim women on there who are still my friends to this day, and I interacted with them. And it was so funny is I knew ex-Muslims, and this article was about ex-Muslims in Australia, but I couldn't find any ex-Muslims in Australia. I was like, oh, fuck. okay, I found ex-Muslims in Saudi. Great. They can't help me. I found like they can't. I found ex-Muslims in Kuwait. They can't help me either.
Right.
And it's like, well, who the fuck am I gonna get? And I found some amazing women in like UK and in America. And so I'm like, where's my Aussies? Like, I need my Aussie ex-Muslims. And I was like, okay, I can't find them. And so then I decided to create my blog, which was at that time was the Nullifidian.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the name I chose. Because even though I was an open ex-Muslim, I was still a bit hesitant about like doing it online because Muslims are fucking crazy sometimes. And so I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to put my face on the internet. Clearly that's not a problem anymore. So yeah, so I started doing a blog because I noticed as well that there was no one who, like, there was obviously people from like, not liberal, but like more, I guess you could say more open-minded families. And then obviously had like your Saudi girls and that with like the fucked up lives that they have. And I was like, but there's no one really talking about like really writing about like ex-Muslim experiences in like Western countries. Like I couldn't really find anything like that. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to start a blog. So I started a blog, The Nullifidian. And through there I met people and then I ended up in like one of the numerous chat groups that ex-Muslims are in. And I was the only Australian in a chat group of over 200 people, the only Australian. And I was like, I'm never going to find them. And so I was like, they're like so tiny. Like they're not here. Where are they? We don't even have that big, we don't even have that big of a population in Australia. So I was like, how can I not find them? Eventually I found them. And I was like, okay, cool. I need to do more. I need to speak more about ex-Muslims in Australia because no one is. So then I created a YouTube channel, I created a Twitter account, and I did all of that. And then I met more Australian ex-Muslims, and I was like, yay, I'm not alone. There's more people like me. Yay! But yeah, I mean, I guess like you could like that's I guess that's my whole like ex-Muslim journey, really, from like my little version of me up until actually discovering what the fuck an ex-Muslim was.
This is going to be a really stupid question, I think. But what does Nullifidian mean or Nullifidian mean?
Okay, so just bear with me 2 seconds.
Sure.
I'm going to Google this because it's my sleepy time. Nullifidian is basically a person having no faith or religious belief.
Okay.
So I have no faith or religious belief. I am an atheist I tend to swing more to an anti-theist on the side of things. Like I hate all religions equally because I'm not a bigot. I hate all of them. So I was like, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to call myself, and I kind of tossed up a few names as well. I was like, oh, I could call myself a true disbeliever because you know how the whole play on the words. I'm a true Muslim. I'm like, well, I'm a true disbeliever. But then I settled on the Nullifidian because I feel like at that time for me, it was quite a good way of expressing myself because I didn't necessarily put ex-Muslim in my bio. I would have like atheist or I would have former Muslim. I never really had ex-Muslim. And hey, it works out for me now. I mean, people know the Nullifidian. Yay.
Yeah. No, it's a good word. I honestly had never heard it before until I reached out to you and a few others. I started to see it, but no, it's a great word.
Definitely.
How did you end up getting by? It couldn't have been from ex-Muslims because you didn't really, you said you didn't discover that until later. But I mean, how did you end up, doing things like getting IDs, getting a job? How did you actually manage to do that eventually?
So it took about, I think, 6 months or so where I managed to get, okay, so how it works in Australia is obviously we have our government benefit system is called Centrelink, and even once I was able to prove my identity, which meant I had to go to the police, I had to sign affidavits, and I had to do all this mumbo jumbo. Thankfully I had like a student registration number, so I could use that as it, and they kind of like hunted it all down on my information.
Mm-hmm.
So even with all of that, I actually still couldn't get government benefits, even though I'd been approved for them. I couldn't get them. So, and the reason for that being is in Australia, if you are under the age of 25 and you have not had a full-time job or you haven't earned over a certain amount of money, you're technically still under your parents' income.
Mm-hmm.
So my father earned a lot of money. So even though I wasn't living at home, so I even tried to, so we have like what we call like youth allowance, which is like for younger people, and then you have living away from home allowance. I couldn't even get the living away from home allowance, which was like fuck all. It was like $150 or $200 a fortnight. It's like I couldn't even get that. I'm like, that would have helped me like a little bit. So I actually had to find a way to get emancipated from my parents. And the reason why it was so difficult for me to even do that process was I would go into the offices and I'd be like I need government assistance. I cannot return home. Like if I return home, like I'll like be getting married, I'll get shipped overseas, or I could disappear, like I could die. Like I really need you to help me. And there was no sympathy. No, I wouldn't say there was no sympathy, but I think it was a distinct lack of understanding. And so they were like, okay, we'll help you, but we need to speak to your parents. And I was like, they're gonna lie to you. Like they're gonna lie. They're actually gonna lie. And it's even nowadays. Like if you look at cases like that, half recently in like her own, they were like, oh, it's a family matter. Oh, it's not this or it's not that. It's like they will lie. And I knew this 9 years ago. I'm like, they're gonna fucking lie to you guys. And I was correct. They lied. They're like, oh, we want her home. We love her. We this and that. And then the caseworker would come back to me like, oh, we know they've rejected it because you've got no proof. And I was like, do I need to die to show you proof?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you need from me? So thankfully, I found an amazing woman who was kind of like a mutual, because I had to find somebody who had known my family and myself for more than 2 years. So I had to find somebody. So I actually contacted one of my father's co-workers. And I asked her, I'm like, can you please do this for me? Can you please write an official letter, and I want you to sign it, and I need you to say that it is dangerous for me to go back home. And she was like, yeah, I'll do it. And so that process took a while. It took I think about 3 or 4 months because I had to investigate, I had to do like interviews and everything like that. And eventually I was able to get into it. But even then I still didn't have ID or anything. So I sucked up a lot of courage and I called my parents and I said, I need all of my ID. I need my birth certificate. I need my passport. I need all documentation relating to me.
Yeah.
And they said, no, you're not going to get it. And I was like, why? You don't need it. You don't. I'm not there. So actually what I ended up doing was I just rocked up to their house. And I knocked on the door and I said, give me all my identification. And I need it now. Well, she couldn't really refuse me. I was at the door. And so I managed to get all that. And even with that, it was still kind of hard because my name was, because when I'm converted, so my name on some documentation, so like the important documentation, like a passport, for example, was the name that had been changed to when my mother had converted, but my birth certificate was in my birth name. My license was in the name that was on my passport, but I couldn't even I couldn't get some forms of identification because my birth certificate was not in the same name. It was just like this whole clusterfuck.
I know what you mean. Like sometimes like you get like your like birth name and then you also get like the name that you have under your religion basically, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, so basically it's a very common trend with people who convert to Islam is that they change their names to Arabic ones.
Right.
So, for example, Cat Stevens is a very good example. Cat Stevens, Yusuf Islam.
Uh-huh.
You know? It's kind of like a shedding of your infidel persona of when you become. It's like you've been reborn, I guess you could say, as a Muslim. So yeah, it was definitely a tricky scenario, and I'm still having issues with that. I now can't. I'm trying to get my license changed. It's been over 9 years. I'm still trying to get my license changed into my birth name, but I can't get my license changed into my birth name because my license was initially issued with my passport that had the Arabic name on it, but I can't get that passport reissued because I don't have a birth certificate with that name on it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yay, another round through the court system. Yay, I have so much time to do that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What was your first job? Where did you end up, making money?
I was shit at it. It was business to business sales. They hire anybody and everybody.
Right.
Um, it was basically I was working for a telco company and I was walking into businesses. It was the worst fucking job for someone who grew up like fucking isolated. I had to convince people to sign up on phone plans. I was so bad at it. I quit after 2 weeks and I was like, I can't do this. They're so mean and they hate me. Um, uh, it was horrible. But after that, I actually went, I became a bartender.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I worked in hospitality for a very, very long time, and it's one of I'm probably the only person on earth that'll say this, but I love the hospitality industry, and I worked my way up to management. And I feel like, what helped me do all that is working these stupid hours of just all this stuff was the fact that I was like, I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be like, I can't do this. I'd be like, no, I have to survive. you know, I have to prove everybody wrong. And sometimes it's what you need to do to get up and get through every single day. Is like, I'm gonna be like, fuck you to everybody who thinks I can't make it.
Oh, dude, fuck you is a great energy giver. It really is. It's amazing.
So I eventually, when I got onto some benefits from the government and stuff like that, I went and completed my bar course and I got like my certifications in hospitality and I worked in that for a while, and then I was kind of deciding what I wanted to do. I actually went back and completed my high school certificates. I did all of that, and I was like, okay, I don't need it. Like, I didn't really need my high school certificate because, I was in hospital and I had, it was a good job and I was making ends meet. But I was like, no, it's the one thing I've been deprived of my entire fucking life. So I'm going to go and get it. And so I went and I did my year 11 and 12. So I completed my high school education. And so it's quite funny. So in in Australia now, it's like 13 years of an education. So from prep up until year 12, it's your 13 years of education.
Mm-hmm.
And the other day I was calculating and I'm like, I only have like 7-ish years of education under my belt. And I was like, I think I'm doing pretty fucking well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And eventually I found it's the field that I work in now. I got started in that industry and I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to go and do this. Again, it was the kind of industry that was always like, fuck you, you can't, I was always like, nah, fuck you Muslims. Like, oh, you say women can't do this and it's against the religion. Well, I'm going to go and do it. And so, I did that, and I've been working in this industry now for 5 years. And I love it. And, I've been able to accomplish so much. Like, I've been able to do so much with my life. And I haven't traveled or anything like that, but I don't need to travel because I look at myself and I'm like, I look at like now me as a 28-year-old woman, and I look back at 18-year-old me, and I'll be like, fuck, I think I've done all right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, well done. I hope you know that you're a total badass. That was incredible about everything that you've done. I mean, do you have any communication with your parents whatsoever at this point in your life?
No. Let me say it this way. I was at the local shopping center, right near my workplace, and I was getting myself a kebab. And I heard someone say my Arabic name, and I looked up, and my heart stopped because sitting there right across from me was my mother in her full burqa. I haven't seen the woman in a very long time, and my first reaction was to spin in my heel and fucking bolt it out of the shopping center. I was like, not today. I am not dealing with this.
Yeah.
So that would have been the last communication I've had with my mother. My sisters, lasting conversation I had with them was the ex-Muslim community is a bit big online. Like, you know, we've got ex-Muslims all over the world. And of all the ex-Muslim podcasts and interviews and that to be shared to my sisters, mine happened to be shared to them.
Great.
And so, like, I am, like, they know I'm not a Muslim and stuff like that. But the fact that I was talking bad about Islam really pissed them off. And I believe their exact words were that I was a disgusting and despicable human being who has no right to call them my sisters anymore.
How do you feel about that? Is that just sort of, you know, just good riddance, or is that like, were you close with them at any point? Like, what do you is where you are right now, like, you think the best that it could be, or do you think it could potentially be better at some point?
It's not like I haven't tried. So I briefly got back in touch with my mother about 3.5 years ago because she needed my help with something. And I was like, okay. And she's like, oh, you know, she made all these promises about how, you know, she's like, everything's going to be better and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I was like, okay, well, she's trying. You know, it's been like 4 years since I've left home. She's trying. So I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send her an email. And in this email, I'm going to list all of my grievances and everything that I'm feeling, everything I've kept pent up, you know, my entire life. I'm going to tell her. I'm like, I need you to acknowledge these things that you've done, the things that you allowed to happen, what you've come. And I said, if you can, and I said to her, if you can acknowledge these things, if you will say, I'm sorry, we can work on our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so she responded to that with, it's all in your head.
Jesus.
In the most basic sense, gaslighting. And so I was like, oh. And then she made this whole comment, and then I said, I even responded back to that because I was like, you know what? Maybe she didn't understand what I was trying to say. So I responded back and I said, look, you didn't even bother to read what I'd said, so I'm just going to address what you've said to me. You know, I continued it on, and I was getting a bit worked up, and I basically said to her, I said, I remember exactly what I said. I said, you want a life with me. You want to have me in your life. And I will be in your life. But what you need to understand is that I don't agree with Islam. I don't agree with any religion. And you do. Because to you, religion is the most important thing. I don't matter to you. Religion matters to you. Islam matters to you. Allah matters to you. Muhammad matters to you. The Quran, the Sunnah, all that stuff matters to you more than me. I told her what I do. I told her about the ex-Muslim activism that I do. And I said, you would not support me in what I do. You would not support me helping people escape religious persecution and abuse. You will not support me in that. And she turned around, and it's one of the very last things that she said to me. She goes, how dare you say I wouldn't support people escaping abuse, but what I will not tolerate is you talking bad about Islam. And I was just like, she's never going to listen. She's never going to see what I'm trying to do. She's never going to accept me for who I am.
Right.
Because some part of her is always going to be like, she'll come back. Or if I keep pushing Islam at her, she'll come back. And, you know, I wish I've had some moments in my life, you know, the past 8-9 years where, you know, I wish I had a mum I could go to, you know. When you're having those shit times and you just want to go and you want to talk to your mum or your dad and you just want someone to, like, you know, just be there for you and love you unconditionally. And, you know, I've had those moments. You know, I've thought about my future. You know, if I have kids, how am I going to explain to my kids that they have a grandmother and she's alive, but I don't want you to associate with her because of her beliefs. And it sounds like a horrible thing, but I was raised with this woman,
Right.
you know? And I wish I'd be able to see my sisters grow up. Like my youngest brother, who I left home when he was 2, I raised him. I was basically his mother, just because my own mother had health issues. He doesn't even know who I am because my family erased me completely. He doesn't know that I'm his big sister. He doesn't, because obviously he was a child when I left, and it rips my heart to shreds that I can't do that. It rips my heart to shreds that I'm not going to be able to go to my sister's weddings. My brother got married, and the irony of this is my mum is a convert. So she has non-Muslim family members. The non-Muslim family members were invited to the wedding and I wasn't. And so I kind of say, and I always say this to other ex-Muslims, and I guess the same can apply to, anyone from leaving a religion like ex-Jehovah's Witness or something like that, is that it's like grieving the living.
Yeah.
And it's like you go into this, like, and it's not even a tangible thing. Like, you're like, they're alive, but I can't hold them and I can't be with them. And it's like a weird sense of, like, I wouldn't say it's isolation or loneliness, but it's kind of this emptiness that you have when you, like, talk about family. Like, with myself, like obviously I am a white people. But like, and a lot of my like coworkers, they kind of don't really know much about my upbringing. And so, questions like, oh, what are you doing for Christmas? I'm like, staying at home watching Lord of the Rings. It's like, oh, what are you doing on Easter? Probably staying at home watching Lord of the Rings. And it just kind of like it's like you forget those sort of things. And even like with myself, like when dating people, it's like, oh, so what do your family do? It's like, they think about blowing you up. Like, it's like, it's quite a really interesting concept, and I'm not alone in this. Like, I've spoken to other ex-Muslims, I've spoken to ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, I've spoken to ex-Christians, ex-Mormons, ex-Jews, ex-Hindus, like exes of all exes, and it's kind of a very common thing, especially when your family doesn't accept you for what you are.
Yeah, you put that really well. Grieving the living. It's like they kind of leave like a people-shaped hole, in your heart. It's just that, yeah. I was lucky enough to not have lost contact with my family, and they were decent people. It's not like there would have really it wasn't like a cult or like something that was really radical like what you've grown up in. But I've heard this story so many times, unfortunately, that it's like, you just. It sounds almost like for you, it's like it's better that you got away from your parents, but the cost was getting away from people that you raised yourself. I mean, that's rough. So, anyway, I did want to ask you about one other thing. So, like when you were talking about sort of like your process of losing your faith, and like just sort of saying that this wasn't something that you sort of said that you started with like, even if this God is real, then he's not worthy of worship. And that I think is like the starting point for a lot of people. They question his goodness or his morality. Did you just sort of end up going to there's no God immediately from that? Or was there sort of like a process of you saying like, all right, so I don't agree with God, and then you don't know if there's a God, and then you're certain that there is no God?
I kind of went from this whole point of straight into, so a lot of people I've met have done this whole concept of, they study other religions. I skipped that process, and I was like, well, no, because obviously I was like, oh, I was kind of always, I guess you could say I was agnostic a lot of my teen years. And I was like, oh, maybe there's something out there. Don't know what it is.
Right.
Could be aliens. It could be Klingons. Who the fuck knows? No one, no one knows. So I was kind of just a bit like, eh. And I was like, if God's out there, let him fucking judge me. Like, he hasn't shown himself to me, so whatever. And then when I was like, in my head, I was like, well, if God is real, this shit shouldn't be happening.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't, If God was real, if God was this, like, caring, the most merciful, like every Muslim says, when they recite the Quran or when they eat or before they do anything, they say, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most kind. Okay? Not really seeing the mercy out there. Is the mercy when starving children, is the final mercy that when they die? Is that the mercy that God is giving to these people? Is that God being kind? And so I was always kind of a bit in my head that God's a bit of a dickhead. And so I guess I was always in a survival mode. So I was like, well, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just gonna do my own thing. And I wasn't until I was probably, even after a few years after I left home, again, because I was in that survival mode of trying to not be homeless, not starve,
right.
That sort of stuff. It was never really on the forefront until someone asked me, because like I said, when I first left home, I still had to use my Arabic name. And so that was always an opener, because part of my Arabic name has Sheikh in it. And a blue-eyed white girl with the name Sheikh is really confusing. So it would have, I was at, and then someone would ask me, they're like, oh, so what are you? And so I'd always would say, oh, I was raised Muslim, but I'm not anymore. Again, because I didn't know what the fucking ex-Muslim was.
Right.
And then I remember this person was like, oh, so you believe in a God? And I was like, no, I don't believe in a God. And then I was like, oh, wait, I'm an atheist. So I guess it was always kind of there in me, but because it wasn't this big, or I guess you could say it's a gradual process where I was in my head, I was weigh out the pros and the cons, all the evidence. I was like, no, I don't really think there's a God. And let's be real, I've walked into a church and I haven't been burnt alive.
Mm-hmm.
I've walked into the mosque, I haven't been incinerated on the spot. I haven't been killed, so I don't really think there's some higher being out there. I mean, maybe he's really busy letting orphans and all that shit die in the Middle East and Africa to pay attention to log me in Australia.
He's got a lot going on with that, yeah.
It's a lot of work and effort. But yeah, I don't really think that I've actually listened to so many ex-Muslim stories, and I find it so difficult to sometimes relate to their journeys out. And I think it's perhaps because I was raised in such an authentic or extreme version of Islam that I didn't even to have to discover it, because all this stuff was factual to me. Yeah, Muhammad married a 6-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was slaves. Yes, it's all factual to me, and that didn't bother me. I was like, yeah, but your God allows it, so your God's fucked up. So
yeah,
I guess you could say it was more of a, I didn't realize I was an atheist because I was trying to survive.
Yeah, you probably weren't thinking about it a whole lot. If fuck you and fuck your God was the thing that gave you the energy to leave, I mean, I'd assume that you probably wouldn't be, thinking about God all that much. You'd be thinking about surviving, like you just said.
Yeah, that was a bit more important than what I did or did not worship.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I get that. Have you thought about, God or anything like that since? Has sort of the quest for, for truth of the nature of God, or how we all have come into existence? Have you thought about any of that since you've had some time to do a little bit more than just survive?
I've gone through some pretty heavy shit since I left home and became an atheist and an ex-Muslim. I've gone through some pretty dark stuff. And I've never once turned and gone, oh God, why is this happening to me? Or God help me.
Right.
Never. Once. I pride myself on being a very logical person. If you ask my ex, it's too logical. I'm a very logical person, and I ask why a lot, and I like to know why do people worship gods? Like, why do you need a god? Like why?
Mm-hmm.
And I ask this question a lot, and people don't like it because it's kind of one of those questions. Like they'll be like, "Oh, but because God, but why? Why? Oh, because God created, but why? Why? Like, okay, God created mankind, so all right, cool. So that just means he's automatically deserving of our love and appreciation and stuff. So if I was a scientist and I created something and it was a living thing, that thing has to worship me?
Hmm.
Is that the logic that you have? And I'm very, that's how I operate, which is why nobody likes to debate me. I kind of like focus on these little points and be like, why? I sound like an annoying like 3-year-old. I do, why?
Or a
But
philosopher. I mean, not only 3-year-olds ask that question. I mean, that's a good question to ask.
yeah, so I believe in evolution. I think it's always made sense to me, evolution, like the whole oh, if you were to listen, I don't know if you've ever like paid to like listened to or like researched about the Muslim story of Adam and Eve. It's just like it doesn't make fucking sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like these are okay, so they're in heaven, and like that kind of is pretty much quite similar to the Christian way. But then when God puts them like on Earth, it's like it's so fucking confusing. It's like he put Adam on like one side of Earth, he put Hawa or Eve on the other side of Earth, and then he put Iblis or like Satan on another part of Earth. And I'm like, the fuck for? It doesn't make sense. What makes more sense to me, evolution. That makes sense because you are showing me the process of how A to B goes. And the other question is I was like, okay, well, this makes sense. I'm studying some science, and studying about genetics as well. Like it's so fascinating. It's like, okay, you have one and obviously because my family is mixed, so like my half of my siblings are they're mixed race. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, and it was interesting to see like some of my siblings had like more of my mother's features, others had more of my dad's features. And I was like, I was like always fascinated about it. But then I'm like, hang on, if we came from two people, how the fuck are there this many races on Earth? How? How is it even possible? There'd be like so many different races on Earth, and then Muslims will be like, oh, but that's because Adam was like this and Eve. I'm like, it doesn't make fucking sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's bullshit. And so, I did my research. I like to research, and I love to read, and I like to know the why people do things. And I believe that some people need God because they're too afraid of not having something there that will hold them accountable because they're too afraid to hold themselves accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah? Like if I go and do something really terrible, that's on me.
Mm-hmm.
I have to take ownership over that. Or if something terrible happens to me, I have to take ownership over that situation. I can't ask God why it happened to me or blame God for any of that. I can't do any of that. That's not on that's on me. I have to take responsibility for it. And I think it takes a very, 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 very strong self-awareness and confidence. And I would even say self-respect to not blame something else for your faults or need a god or need a religion or guidelines. Like I believe that the people who need religion are the people who may have let's be really antagonistic right now, mental health problems. I sincerely believe that. Like I look at someone like my mother, who Islam has given her a reason to be prejudiced. It's given her a reason to be hateful. It's given her a reason to be superior to other people when it puts her on a pedestal because she's a white convert.
Right.
And I have coworkers who, I was raised as an atheist and then I found Jesus. What? That doesn't make sense. And I look at her and I look at it from a logical perspective because it's like, well, why do you need God to tell you to not be a dickhead. Like, you shouldn't need God to do this for you. So why do you need that? And then I feel like there's, like I said, like there are some people who just have no self-awareness or self-confidence or self-ownership that they need something else to tell them. Like they don't let me put it this way. They don't truly believe in themselves. They do not believe that they are capable of making the correct decisions, and they need some form of approval from somewhere in everything that they do, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. I think people who don't need God would probably run businesses really well. And I don't mean like they're psychopaths or anything like that. I mean that like I what I'm trying to say is like, you know, you need that mentality to like to take ownership of everything that goes right and goes wrong in your business, just like you would need in life to, without God, be willing to take responsibility for yourself and the things that happen to you and the way that you treat others. You know, if I ran a business and I said that you know, I'm not getting customers and it's the customer's fault, my business is going to fucking fail. You know what I mean? Like I need to own that and say I'm doing something wrong. I need to do something to turn this around, change my product, change my marketing, whatever. You know, like it's my fault. Even if it's like not directly something that I did wrong consciously, I need to say I run this shit. It's my problem. I need to fix it. When with like, you know, with people that like desperately need God, it's like they kind of need a reason to a reason to be, I don't even know exactly how to put it. Like they need something outside of themselves to like feel like they're justified, they're approved to do whatever it is that they want to do. They need approval for everything and they need justification for everything. Whereas you and I will say, you know, I'm going to not be a dick just because, you know, I don't want somebody to be a dick to me, or like, you know, I'm just in general not going to be a dick because I don't need a reason not to be a dick. You just shouldn't be a dick.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like as well, like some people need, maybe it's because I, again, like I believe in myself and I believe in my ability as a person and I believe in my logic and my reasoning. And again, that ownership where I take control of my own destiny.
Yeah.
You know? I'm responsible for my actions, and I'm like, that's why I never get even offended. You can say whatever the fuck you want to me. I'm like, cool, whatever. You know, like that's your opinion on me. There's no reason why should I worry and care and concern about what other people think of me or do or want to say or be. Well, I've got enough shit on my own plate to deal with, and I work in an industry where I work in. You know, we attend a lot of like, you know, there's like management and like self-help and like development and empowering people, and there's one concept that I was, it was more recently, was about being above the line, you know, and it's basically all about, okay, you've had a shit day, you know, you haven't reached the targets you wanted or you haven't achieved what you wanted in that day. And you've got two options. Option one is you could go back to your room or your house or your office or your car or whatever, and you could sit there and you can list every single fucking reason on earth of why it's shit, and you can sit in this negative headspace and stay below that line. You can stay below that line and not take any ownership over it. You can't be no accountability. You can blame every external factor out there. You can blame God, you can blame the traffic, you could blame the bitch that works in like fucking unit C. Like, you know, you could do all that. You could do all that.
That bitch.
I know. Oh. Or you could rise above that line, take accountability for your actions, and take ownership over your actions, and be like, yeah, okay, traffic was shit. There's nothing I can do about it. Yeah? Bitch in Unit C, maybe had a shit day. Again, nothing I can do about it.
Yep.
You know? And blame, and then once you've reached that point, you'll be like, well, I control my own destiny. And I hate saying that because I sound all la-di-da and wishy-washy. But, like, I try to live my life as stress-free as possible. Which in my books means don't be a dickhead. Don't worry about what other people are thinking or saying or doing in regards to you, because it's not, all it's going to do is just stress you out. Like if I honestly took to heart every single mean thing that someone said to me, I would probably walk straight to the nearest bridge and kill myself. Like if I seriously did, I'll be honest. But I don't need that. everyone's entitled to their own opinion. So if you want to be a Bible basher, go be a Bible basher. Go do that. You want to be a woman that worships a green sheep on the moon, go and fucking do it. I don't care.
Have a blast.
Go for it. The only time I'm actually going to say something is when you tell me that I have to do it. You tell me that I have to respect you and your opinion just because it's religion or whatever the fuck it is. No, I don't have to respect your opinion. You don't have to respect my opinion. What you do have to respect, however, is that I'm a human being.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yep. You realize that that is really where so many people that consider themselves like these ultra liberal, like I was raised to be a pretty liberal person, but like we've totally failed in the regard of what you just said. We have 100% failed ex-Muslims. We've 100% failed anybody who, wants to speak up about something that might be considered controversial. Like we've completely neglected, anybody who has the opinion that you just shared.
Yes, of course. And it's sad, and it kind of, I look at these things and I look at, when I went back and did my high school education, I studied the French Revolution and I studied the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, and I studied all these in one of my classes. And you look at it and you're like, okay, well, these people have all these ideas and all these things and concepts, and it's so fresh. And we're taught to like respect these people, my mind's blanking on every single one of them, but we're taught to like respect people who bring about change and like all that sort of stuff. And then we sit there and we applaud them. But then I also feel like it's becoming the society that we're in, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like in America or Australia, it can be any society that we're in nowadays, is becoming so obsessed with accepting everybody that they can't even accept everybody, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah, it does.
This like, for example, there's like, I met a young gentleman at the conference, and he was kind of saying how, he was raised as an atheist, his family are all atheists. Why does he have to speak on this platform? Like, what can he say on this platform? And I was sitting there, I'm like, you can say anything you fucking want. I'm not going to stop you.
Right.
And I think as this concept of shutdown culture, it's so prevalent through everyone else. Like, you would be surprised about the stares I get. Like, even tonight when I stood up to give my talk, and, everyone who spoke before me, Iranian, Pakistani, and Australian. And so I've gotten up, and everyone, like the confusion, and the audience were Australian. They were white Australians. And I've gotten up to speak, and they look so freaking confused. And it's like, they have this like idea in their heads of like what a Muslim is, or what an ex-Muslim is, or what a Christian is, or what any of these people are, that you tend to forget that they're not the only ones. Like, I was a 14-year-old girl walking the streets of Melbourne, Australia in a niqab, and I was being abused every single day, being told to go blow myself up and this and that. So I know both sides of the spectrum. Yeah, I was a victim, and none of these dickheads knew that I was a 14-year-old child being forced to wear a niqab, and they didn't give a fucking shit about that.
Right.
But then I'm also on that other side where it's like, I hate calling myself a victim because I don't think I'm a victim. But like, you've got ex-Muslims are victims of Muslims. Now, in Australia or in America or Canada or UK or anyone that's not a Muslim country, Muslims are the minority.
Mm-hmm.
And minorities, I will admit, are persecuted. They are. Well, not persecuted like their lynch mobs are out to get them, but they're like abused or like stares or whatever.
Harassed and everything, yeah.
Harassed, yeah, like, because, there's some real dumb people on earth.
Yeah.
But if you were to go to a Muslim country, so these feminists that stand there and are like, oh, hijab is about this and whatever, go to a Muslim country and say that.
Mm-hmm.
Go to a Muslim country and wear what you want to wear on the streets. Walk through Mecca in a bikini. I fucking dare you. I do. I'm gonna dare you. Go and fucking do it, and see what happens. Go and see what happens to gays in Malaysia and Indonesia. You know, just because they may be a minority or a harassed minority or a persecuted minority in one country doesn't mean every single fucking one of them on earth is that same persecuted minority.
Mm-hmm.
Because you go to Pakistan. Pakistan has ex-Muslims, has Christians, has Jews. They're all persecuted. If you're not Muslim, you're persecuted they will persecute you in those countries.
Mm-hmm.
You dare to speak up, they will kill you. Look at Bangladesh, all these Bangladeshi atheists. And you know what makes it even worse is in some countries, some Muslim countries, you could still be a Muslim, but you could call for secularism, you could call for democracy, and they'll still try to fucking kill you or throw you in jail. Look at Saudi Arabia right now. How many of those female activists are currently in jail for the same thing that MSB has now said is allowed? Women rights activists from Saudi who are fighting for women to have the right to vote, for women to have the right to drive, are right now languishing in prisons in Saudi, despite the fact that it's now legal in the country for women to drive. Yeah. They were all rounded up and thrown into jail. They're not being released. And no one's saying anything about this. No, like, everyone praised MSB, which is like his acronym, the King of Saudi.
Yeah.
Everyone, he's so progressive. Oh my God, look at this man. Like, women can drive in his country. And then the feminists jump behind him. And I'm just sitting there like, are you fucking kidding me? Of all of the people on the earth, you're a feminist. You identify as a feminist. So why the fuck aren't you supporting other feminists?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I could rant about this for ages and ages and ages and hours and hours and hours and hours. And so I said it a few years ago where advocacy groups for minorities are so obsessed for advocating for the minorities that they care about that they forget that these minorities are oppressing others.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember if it was Ayaan Hirsi Ali or if it was somebody else. I think it was, but she said something about tolerance of intolerance, and I did an interview with Apostate Prophet, and he tried to come up with it also. I haven't looked up the quote, but it's like in an effort to be tolerant of everybody, we're being tolerant of views that are intolerant. So therefore, you're being tolerant of intolerance while there are people that are trying to be intolerant of intolerance that you're ignoring.
Yeah. It's like it boggles my mind, and I mean I try to not put my own perceptions because people perceive things differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I tend to be a very logical person, and I, in a sense, lack I guess you call empathy for illogical things. Maybe I'm a Vulcan, who knows?
I appreciate all these Star Trek references, by the way. I love Star Trek.
I'm like a huge nerd, okay? Like I'm the biggest nerd you'll ever meet. But it's serious. It's like I'm trying to have like empathy and understanding. But then it's also those where like, and I feel like, a lot of atheists may also sit in this thing. It's like, well, I believe this, so why don't you believe this? Like, why is it that like I was raised in the same household as my siblings, yet I'm the only ex-Muslim?
Yeah.
Like, what happened? It's different. And so I think it also comes back to us as humans. Like, I'm really big, not the Myers-Briggs blah blah, but like I'm really big in like personality profiles and understand that people learn things differently and they understand things differently and they perceive things differently and how they react to situations is very different, And so that whole concept of like being so tolerant that you tolerate intolerance.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, seriously, like, okay, if you're okay, say you went up to a woman who was on the beach with her daughter, and her 4-year-old daughter's in a bikini, and you go up to this woman and say, "Why is your daughter in a bikini? That's not appropriate." She's gonna rip your fucking head off.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you looking at my daughter like that? Oh, you pedophile, you this, you that, blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
That same woman will defend a 4-year-old girl in a hijab.
Right. It's exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, it's absurd.
It's like, ugh, where is the logic? There is no logic in this, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah. Do you see any sign of it getting better? Like, do you think that, like, the fact that we're having this conversation more, do you think that it's like, do you see any hope? Do you see a ray of sunshine at the end of this at all?
I do everything within my power to educate people.
Yeah.
You know, so like in my workplace, I don't really do it that often now anymore. But my coworker, who is a born again, we were having a discussion. So I work with a born again Christian, an ex Jehovah's Witness, and obviously I'm an ex Muslim. And we're all in the office and we're having this discussion. And I kid you not, the born again turns around and says to me when I was talking about my experience, she's like, "Yeah, but Nick, I don't think you were taught the right version of Islam." I literally turned around and I said to her, "Shut the fuck up." like I'm like, huh? And so I literally, okay, now, as you can probably say, I can talk a lot, right? I have a lot to say. I literally did not know what to say beyond, "Shut the fuck up." I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, she goes, "Oh no, Islam doesn't really say that." Have you read the fucking Quran?
Mm-hmm.
No? Come back to me when you have read it. And so I do hope that it does. And I think open discourse is so important. You know, there's ex-Muslims that I don't agree with.
Sure.
And, you know, like, I don't agree with them. There's, you know, you might have points of view that I may not necessarily agree with, and I probably have points of view that you don't agree with. But there's this really cool thing called respect.
Mm-hmm.
And so long as we're respecting each other and having these open dialogues and are willing to actually listen, not listen and interject every few words, but actually listen to what is being said, then a conversation can be had. You know, like when it comes to Muslims, like when I'm talking to a Muslim and they're telling me Islam and this and Islam and that, and I don't agree, and I don't agree with what ISIS do, I'm like, yeah, good. I'm so proud that you don't agree with what ISIS do, because you'd probably kill me if you did. But you can't deny that there's some pretty fucked up shit in your religion that people will follow through with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I have hope that they will create change. And I think a lot of women in particular are becoming disenfranchised with this whole movement. And the more that you have, like, ex-Muslim women, for example, you know, like things like the hijab, before any sort of ex-Muslim movement, and obviously in the more recent years, ex-Muslims have become a bit more prolific on social media with the rapid expansion of social media and how fast it grows and it's developing and evolving. You know, definitely a lot quicker than when I left home. You know, and so the more ex-Muslims are speaking for Islam, I'm just going to speak about Islam from this perspective. Mm-hmm. The more ex-Muslims are speaking up, the more allies they're going to have, and the more allies you have, logically, the more you can take down the others. Mm-hmm. It just makes sense. Like, the more allies you have, the more people that are speaking out your stories, the more people that are having this proper discourse. Because I would say before, for example, No Hijab Day became a thing, like, I think it was last year was the first time I ever heard about No Hijab Day. And so before that, you had the only people that were talking about the hijab on a public platform were Muslims.
Yeah. So
there was no opposing views. And so the more opposing views that are out there, the more people can make informed decisions about things, whether they are Susan who works at the local, like, supermarket or an academic at university. Like, they will all be able to create their own opinions on these things and have those discussions. But you can't create that change in discussions and awareness and opening the minds of people if you're not actually having those discussions.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, conversation is like, you know, it's the backbone of all of this. I mean, I want to ask you about something that like I've been trying to do recently that I think has to do with what just like in general, like talking to people that you disagree with and all of that, or like sort of challenging yourself to realize that you do empathize with somebody that you think you disagree with, but you might actually not. When I first started this show, I always knew that I was gonna end up interviewing ex-Muslims, but I'm an ex-Christian, so I started off with ex-Christians because I wanted to create something for people to realize that you're not alone if you question your beliefs and then you leave and then you find out that there are a lot of people that aren't struck by lightning for doing so. So I started with ex-Christians because that was just what I knew. And then when I started to hear more about what ex-Muslims go through, I wanted to get ex-Christians aware of this because, like, I think that, like, in Christianity, like, you're raised to believe that, every other religion is wrong. So it's like they're not your enemy. There are some Christians who do believe that the people of other religions are their enemy, but biblically that's not the right way to look at them. But, like, because they sort of think that that Islam is one of those things that's not really looked upon kindly in Christianity, that like we should be supporting Islam because it's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, like that kind of thing. I disagreed with that as soon as I started interviewing ex-Muslims and before that as well, because my thing that I want to support is people who have left religion as a whole. I don't want to support one God instead of my God. You know what I mean? Even though in this case we're actually probably talking about the same God. So my question for you is that patronizing? Like, is that patronizing to have to try to think that like there are more people who have left other religions that can support ex-Muslims? Like, do you feel as though like you guys can stand up on your own and you don't need help, or do you welcome help from other apostate communities that are trying to get your message out there more?
Myself personally, I think like okay, so I've come across ex-Muslims that believe only ex-Muslims can talk about ex-Muslim shit, and I'm just like, fuck off. Mm-hmm. That's my opinion on it. Okay, next question. No, it's one of the reasons why I created Heretics Corner, because I remember I was on Tumblr and I was following the atheist tag, and I was following also following this a Tumblr blog that was called Faces of Atheists, and people could submit pictures of themselves and a little bit about them as well. And I remember I was looking at, like, for example, I think it was two accounts, an ex-Jehovah's Witness and an ex-Mormon. Mm-hmm. And I remember, particularly the ex-Mormon, I was reading her stuff and I was like, holy crap. Some of the things that this girl went through was so similar to things that I went through. And yes, I was an ex-Muslim, she was an ex-Mormon, but some of the things were so close because, as a woman, religions are probably all religions are misogynistic. So there's this idea that women are less than men, and they must be obedient, they must be quiet, they must do this, they must do that. And so I don't think we should or we can reject. Like, yes, okay, as an ex-Christian, it can be a bit awkward, and I feel a bit awkward talking to offering advice to like an ex-Mormon, for example, because it's not really something that I know about, and I have had them come up and ask me questions, and I'm like, oh, I can give advice in some aspects. So, for example, if you're so you're an ex-Christian, mm-hmm. or you're an ex-Mormon or whatever it is, and an ex-Muslim could come to you if you've had similar experiences, like ostracization, mm-hmm. An ex-Muslim, and you can bond over that, and you can talk about different coping mechanisms. Like, I've had so many exes of different religions tell me that, like, when I spoke about the emotional manipulation that parents do to their kids, like when they first leave, like I was talking about from an Islamic perspective, and it's like, they do the whole come back home, blah, 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 and then they turn the whole thing about, oh, we love you, let's talk about it, and then you don't do that, and they like lash out at you and they disown you. Like, it's there are things, all exes of faiths or all apostates from faith have in common, and then there's things that they don't necessarily have in common. You know, like for example, I don't understand the whole concept of no Coca-Cola. Like I hate Coca-Cola, but I don't understand why it's a religious thing. Like I
Right.
don't, it's, you know. But then, like some people will be like, okay, but we don't understand circumcision. Like, why do men have to be circumcised? And it's like, so there are things that we can have, but I think what unites everybody is that of all apostates is that we're all apostates from religion.
Right.
Yeah, we're all people who woke up one day and were like, I don't believe in this. I don't believe in it. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I don't believe in God, I don't believe in Allah, I don't believe in Yahweh, I don't know any Hindu gods. But like that's what we have in common. And so like that's what I tried to do with Heretics Corner is it wasn't just like an ex-Muslim exclusive thing. Okay, yes, obviously I had ex-Muslim guests because well, it's my pool, that's where I know people.
Right.
But all apostate journeys are important and we can all learn from each other. You know, like a lot of the time, ex-Muslims when they're speaking, they'll draw correlations with the gay movement, the gay rights movement, how everything that they went through and how that can relate to us as ex-Muslims. And I feel the same thing can be said to ex-Christians and ex-Jews and all that sort of stuff. Like I'm absolutely fascinated myself personally. Like I love to. There was that documentary about the Hasidic Jews. I was like fascinated by it, and I was like, wow, these people are fucked up as well, like
Hmm.
me.
It's all fucked up.
We're all fucked up in some way or another by religion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that there's nothing wrong with wanting to help people and support people. And I feel like that can actually, the only thing that's wrong about it is thinking that it may be wrong. Yeah? It's
Yeah.
like, is it my place to talk to ex-Muslims can I do anything? Can I do anything to help them because I'm not an ex-Muslim should I talk to them about it or should I do this and it's like thinking that and questioning that is what's wrong.
Yeah. Just do it. Like,
Do it. It's like, do you sit there and you see this like old lady struggling to cross the road? You go, would she be offended if I went up and helped her? Or are you just gonna fucking do it?
yeah. Good, because I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop
Right.
supporting ex-Muslims. Like it's like I got really connected to your community right away, and I don't mean like I'm a big deal. I mean like I connected with what you guys are doing like as soon as I saw it, and yeah, I mean I think that like I'm definitely not a scholar on Islam, and I was never a scholar on Christianity or anything like that, but I know that like there's something wrong when you see somebody saying that that when you see somebody criticizing Islam and they're demonized, and yet that same person would be demonizing Christianity. Like I can't just like sit back and say that this is okay. You know what I mean? Like you can't pick and choose. So it's like I think that I don't think that everybody who criticizes Christianity is going to stand with ex-Muslims' right to criticize Islam. But I think that getting it out there that you should will help. Like I want there to be more people who realize that it's okay to do so, that it's not racist to do so, that it's that you would want somebody supporting you, and we're stronger as a community than we are as separate entities. So
Exactly. It's something that obviously it'll be like put up, but it was something that was touched on today. It's like when people talk about the atheist community, who are they talking about? Is it just ex-Muslims? Is it just ex-Christians? Or is it just ex-Jews? Like, is it just ex of one faith? No, it's not.
hmm
We're all atheists. We're all people who've gone through some shit, whether it be they were just raised as like go to church on Sunday Christians, or never been, they're just Muslim in name. Like, it doesn't matter what your journey is. It doesn't matter if it was like a shocking one or if it was like a pretty easy one. You just woke up and you're like, oh, I actually don't think I believe in this shit. Everyone is an apostate from
Right.
like atheists are apostates, and even atheists who have never been exposed to a religion before, they even have received like they receive backlash for their lack of beliefs, and they always feel a bit hesitant about talking about these things. But I don't think anybody should be silenced about talking about X's of any religion.
Agreed.
At all. Yeah, at all.
Agreed.
Also because I like the sound of my own voice. No, I'm joking.
Do you want to promote your show or anything that you're doing? I don't. I've got like one other question that I just kind of ask everybody, and it's not like a deep question at all. But was there anything that you wanted to just sort of say about what you're doing with Heretics Corner, or anything that you're writing about, anything that you're speaking up on, that you just want to talk about right now?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a busy little bee. So I am currently in the process of launching my own personal YouTube channel, which is primarily going to be obviously ex-Muslim focused, but it's not necessarily a topic that I stick to. Like I said, I do like to speak broadly about things like religion and persecution of atheists. So that's one thing I'm doing. Another thing I'm doing is I have kept the Nullifidian account, and that's actually going to be launching as like an online resource slash publication for ex-Muslims. So I plan on having like special guest writers on there, advice, question Q&A sort of thing, as well as resources that people can like get in contact with in their countries. Heretics Corner, of course, is it's another thing that I do. I'm really lazy at it.
Could you just sort of describe what that is, by the way, just so that people will know what to expect when they look it up?
Yeah, cool. So Heretics Corner is a podcast dedicated to sharing the experiences of all apostates from all faiths. So basically, we want to hear everybody's journey, everyone's, because I don't think ex-Muslims have it worse or better than an ex-Jehovah's Witness or an ex-Mormon or a thing, because like for example, in Australia we don't really have like a crazy ass Bible Belt, but in America you're fucking crazy with your
Oh, it's
Bible.
insane. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And it's like, okay, well you've left Christianity, but if you grew up in like some bumfuck nowhere town in Texas,
Hmm.
like I can imagine, and your whole entire people are like Bible crazy. I can imagine like what you'd be going through, and I think everybody should have a voice, and everybody should be able to tell their story. And so, that's why I wanted to create the Heretics Corner, which I obviously did create. And so we wanted to expand it even more. So instead of just having people of X Face come on, we've had some authors come on, we had psychologists come on and talk about it. We even had people like movements come and talk about their things. So like Free Hearts, Free Minds, which is like from Yasmin Muhammad and Jimmy Bangash. Like we had them come on, and we didn't even talk about their stories. We just wanted to hear what they were doing to help ex-Muslims. And if there was someone who is like doing the same thing for people escaping, like, I don't know, one of your crazy cults that you've got in the US, like, yeah, I'd love to hear you talk, or someone like an organization like Footsteps, like that would be amazing to like be able to like hear what you can do to help people, because I don't think there can ever be too many voices in this world talking about this stuff, and it's important. And like you have your own Out of the Fold podcast, and you might ask questions that I might not think of. Like we could interview the same people and talk to the same people, but we might ask completely different questions.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important that we just kind of like give everybody a voice and everybody can speak up about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate what you all are doing. And is there anything else that you're up to? Any just sort of general activism? Any like events or things that you're going to be a part of that you want to talk about?
The actually only thing I would like is if I can like talking myself up here. No, if
Go for
you
it.
do have like a lot of like, like for the Nullifidian, like eventually, hopefully we could broaden that to a not just ex-Muslims. And eventually, I hope to. That's why it's called the Nullifidian, because it's not just ex-Muslims, but right now it's just ex-Muslims. But I would definitely love to like broaden it to encompass all ex-faith people. But if you have any listeners or followers who would like to submit their stories, like I still have the Heretics Corner blog, because some people aren't comfortable coming on and speaking, and it's fine. So if people want to share their stories and send us through emails or anything like that, like go for it. I want to hear your stories. I want to read your stories. I want to sit there and be like, look at this fucking amazing man or woman. Look at the shit they've gone through, and look how fucking far they've come. Like,
Right.
let's celebrate that. Like, I want to know what that is. And so if you want to do that, not that I'm like telling people to like not help you and talk to you and do shit, but like, hey, I'm here, I want to listen, I want you to tell me all your stories. No, like that's pretty much really what I want. This is why I do what I do. I don't do this because my reasoning behind why I do what I do and all that sort of stuff, it hasn't changed. I speak up because, one, I'm in a position where I can. Two, I'm pretty sure I've got enough fucking experience that I can offer some sort of advice. And three, it's something that is close to me and it's close to my heart. And I don't want to see young people who like struggling 18, 19-year-olds reach that point of despair that I reach. I want to be there for those people. And it doesn't matter what your ex-faith is. I want to be that person there for you. And that's why I do what I do. And that's why I'm going to keep doing what I do. Probably till I get fired from my job for being discriminatory towards Muslims.
Right. Yep. Was there anything else that you just wanted to say that maybe I didn't get a chance to touch on? Anything you wanted to say to ex-Muslims, to the general apostate community, anybody who's questioning their faith, to Muslims, just anything else?
I guess it's kind of like a bit... Oh,
That's okay.
I'm trying to formulate my words. It is now 1:06 a.m. I'm a very tired little busy bee.
You're going to crash soon.
I'll just be like, done, game over. I won't even turn anything off. I'll just like go like lie on the floor. No, I think what I want to say is there's this huge psychological brainwashing that happens to someone from any faith, that when you start to question your faith, that there's part of you that might be like, what if I'm wrong? What if God is really there? What if this is all true and there's just something wrong with me? And Muslims have it where they call it waswas, which is like whispering. Waswas is like whispering from the devil. And so it's like the devil whispers into your ear and like it's trying to tell you all these things and it's taking you from the path. And I want everyone to know that it's completely normal to have doubts. It's completely normal to think this way. There isn't absolutely nothing wrong with you if you question what you've been taught or what you believe. There's nothing wrong with that, because we're humans and we are curious beings and we like to ask why. And when that why cannot be answered logically, we have to be like, well, it doesn't make sense, so why should I believe in it? And I've said this so many times to so many ex-Muslims, because obviously that's who follow me and like me for some reason. There's nothing wrong with questioning your faith. Nothing wrong with it at all. There's nothing wrong with you asking the questions about like going and asking people and researching. There's nothing wrong with you even if you're a Christian and you start researching other religions to find answers. The only thing that will be wrong is if you're dishonest with yourself. So long as you are true to yourself and honest with yourself and you take accountability and ownership over your actions and you stay above that line, you'll be all right. You'll be good. Doesn't matter. And life's going to suck, but hey, that's life.
I had to go to therapy for that question. That question of like, what if I'm wrong? Like, what if God actually does exist? You know, it was it wasn't exactly like a mental health crisis, but you know, it freaked the hell out of me. You know, like when I started to really question whether I believed what I was raised in. Every once in a while, I kind of get like a little twinge, like if like I have a, you know, if I'm going into something that I feel is kind of like risky or something like that. You know, like I sort of, you know, wonder if like, you know, if I die doing this or something like that, like is this going to be, am I going to go to hell? You know, that's sort of what I end up thinking about. Just like not nearly as frequently as I once did, but you know, at one point, I mean, that shit freaked the hell out of me. I kind of relate it to like if you're like I quit smoking about 5 years ago, and I still get these smoking dreams every once in a while. You know, I'll have a dream where I smoked, and then I'll wake up feeling guilty about the fact that I smoked in my dream, and it goes away after about 5 minutes, but it's there. You know, it's a real feeling that I had. It's like a real remembrance of you know the in terms of religion, in terms of like the guilt, the shame, you know, whatever it might have been that kept me believing at one point that leads to some sort of residual fear over time.
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand that. I guess like I never kind of like cared about the concept of a heaven or a hell. Like didn't really like affect me. Like even when my sister passed away, and everyone's like, "Oh, she's in heaven now," and I'm like, "No, she's not. She's like in the ground,
Yeah.
rabbit food." You know, so I guess maybe again that like that part of me which is so, I guess you could say, stupidly like sometimes a bit like freakishly logical, the Vulcan in me, as we've discovered. um but I can understand that like concept. But for someone who, like for myself, as someone who was raised in a Muslim household, like the threat of hell was like a common thing.
Yeah.
And if you keep using the same threats over and over again, you just be like, okay, and I mean, I love to say nowadays, like, oh, you'll burn in hell for eternity. And I'm always like, oh, pack a bikini.
You keep bringing up Vulcans. I mean, so Spock wasn't an unkind person, and you're not an unkind person. I mean,
I'm not.
you can be logical without being like cold. You know what I mean? Like there is a difference between the two. Like the fact that nothing happens after death doesn't mean that life doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Special thanks to Nick for starting a conversation so late for her. Make sure to listen to the Reflection episode with me and Faye. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave 5 stars and a written review. The written reviews help to move the show up the charts. More importantly, though, share the show with someone you trust. For immediate updates and discussions, follow the show on Twitter @OutFoldPodcast. Logo and artwork by my wife. Production by my wife and I. All music by me. This has been Out of the Fold.